In this final video on accounting, we're going to focus on planning, budgeting, and forecasting. And that planning, budgeting, and forecasting process is often called PBF for short in business. And the reason we're focusing on planning, budgeting, and forecasting, or PBF, is because that activity represents a very important function for managers in most companies. But according to Deloitte, one of the world's leading accounting firms, budgets, in fact, are often outdated already by the time they're approved. And the planning, budgeting, and forecasting process in most companies is way too time-consuming and resource-intensive. And also, Deloitte have found that the PBF process is more often than not a finance-focused exercise, which has little relevance in relation to managing a company's real core business activities. Well, that's quite a critical statement by one of the world's leading accounting companies. Why is that? You might be wondering, why is that? Why would the PBF process have little relevance in relation to managing a company's real core business activities? Well, according to Deloitte, that is because there is often a lack of common understanding of the purpose of the PBF process. And that is because managers often don't fully understand why are they planning and forecasting and budgeting in the first place. And what is the PBF process used for in the end? So this means that the natural beginning point is to determine the purpose of the PBF process. And when doing that, remember that the primary purpose for every company and manager during any PBF process should be to execute the strategy, gain more cost consciousness or understanding, and improve decision making in the company. In other words, the PBF process design must follow from the company's purpose. And the reason PBF should follow from the company's purpose is that if it doesn't, you will fall into 6 traps, according to Deloitte. And those 6 traps are: number 1, there is no strategy in place in the company. Number 2, responsibilities and roles are not clear. Number 3, there is a lack of business understanding. Number 4, the PBF models and processes being used are not adjusted to the purpose. Number 5, there is a lack of drive and simulation for following the process. And finally, number 6, the PBF time horizon or frequency is frozen. So now let's talk about these 6 points, which might seem rather obvious, but according to Deloitte, these 6 issues or pitfalls, as they call them, are often the cause of failure in most PBF processes. And the important thing to remember here is that a good PBF process will create value for the company, because that PBF process is business oriented and not just an automatic process which is reacting to the pressure from the finance department or function in the company. Because a great PBF process should help make good decisions faster and improve the quality and focus of the desired future results of the business, rather than just becoming a repetitive automatic process which is analyzing historical data in the company. So now let's discuss each of these 6 traps, because in doing that, you will better understand how to avoid those traps and to create value in the process rather than just more work. The first trap, which has the greatest impact on the PBF process, is that there's not a strategy in place in the first place. What this means is that often in companies, the PBF process is ahead of the strategy, because the right strategy hasn't been established or put in place, and as a result of that, PBF is not precisely focused on executing the right initiatives or efforts. This is because a good strategy helps managers understand how they're going to achieve their objectives, which initiatives or actions are priorities, and so the strategy should form the basis of all PBF activities. So a good strategy tells you as a manager if you should be focused on customer acquisition or retaining existing customers or developing the quality of your company's offering, etc. And the strategy determines which of these or other objectives are most critical for your individual business. So that was number one, the one trap, most important lack of a strategy. The second trap, most commonly seen in companies, is that responsibilities and roles have not been made clear enough. This is often made worse when multiple functions in a company or a business are trying to coordinate PBF goals. And the result of this is that the different parties are on different timelines and there's no coordination of efforts in order to maximize the total value they're creating. So the lesson here is that the company must coordinate their efforts between the functions along with the specific roles and responsibilities of each individual involved in the process. In other words, you need to know who has the responsibility for what. The third trap is that often there are parties involved in the process, the PBF process, who do not have a complete understanding of the business being carried out. And without this understanding, PBF can end up doing things right, but not doing the right things. Or in Deloitte terminology, traditional, optimized, and tuned planning. But that's not good. Your company should attempt to achieve dynamic and best-in-practice planning, which is fully integrated with the strategy of the company, integrated with the tactical and operational processes of the companies, and integrated between the functions of the companies. That's important. The fourth trap is that often companies have not adjusted their PBF process to the purpose. And frequently what happens is that one form of PBF process is created which is optimized for every purpose. So the important lesson here is that a holistic model is important and useful, but individual models should also be created to serve the different business levels and individual functions. And both of these, the holistic and the individual models, should be focused on what is most important to measure and what is most important for the strategy. The fifth trap has more to do with identifying key drivers of your business, and you might think of these as KPIs. What this means is that individual business units should define the critical drivers which are having an impact on their business, for example, number of support calls or retention rates, etc., etc., along with the impact of each of these drivers on the business. As an example, the impact on turnover, etc. You want to know what the numbers mean. And finally, the sixth and final trap, in most PBF processes, the planning period is often set to the financial timeline, rather than the business conditions which the company faces in the marketplace. Because those business conditions can vary considerably from a retail operation to an airplane manufacturer, etc. And by this, what we mean is that every business is unique, so the PBF process can be planned based on that business and the individual conditions of that business rather than the financial timeline. And the most important thing to remember here from this discussion on PBF is that the PBF cycle must be based on the company's strategy, and all execution and reporting of results should be focusing on priority strategic initiatives, and those are different for every business. Wow, okay, that was again a lot of information to take in. So now let's draw some conclusions from this accounting session. And the 3 lessons you should leave this session with are: 1, what gets measured gets done. So the main purpose of accounting information for you as a manager is to help you in making the right decisions. And the accounting information gathered in your company can provide you with some of the data to help you understand if the business you're responsible for is making a loss or a profit, how much debtors owe you, how much your company owes others, etc. And other critical information that can support you in your decision-making process and strategic decision-making process. The second lesson that we have in this session, is that as a manager, you must first define and gather information on a handful, at most, of the key measures or metrics, which we call key performance indicators for your company. First define those. These KPIs will help show you the progress you're making in your business towards achieving your desired outcome and goals, or the gaps between the actual and the desired performance that you're hoping to achieve. And you probably evaluate the relevance of each of those KPIs you have selected. So it's wise when you're doing that to use the SMART criteria. Remember, SMART was the acronym for S, specific, M, measurable, A, attainable, R, relevant, and T, time-bound. And finally, the third lesson from this session is that remember the 6 PBF traps. 1, there's no strategy in place. 2, responsibilities and roles are not clear in the company. 3, there's a lack of business understanding by the people involved in the PBF process. 4, the PBF models and processes being used are not adjusted to the purpose of the company. 5, the drivers have not been defined which help managers follow the process. And finally, number 6, the PBF time horizon and frequency are frozen in the finance calendar. Now, accounting information can help managers, but first it's important to define the most critical metrics for your business. Getting the necessary data can be a challenge for doing that, but by first defining what the data should be, it is then much easier to use managerial accounting information to continuously gather, monitor, and measure the critical data which has the greatest impact on your business performance.